continues to spin. Never splash by swimming in sin. I'm in hella unconventional mind states. As time skates, I'm irate, but then I breathe in indica and chill. These fake big time is steady miniature for real. And I would never fall in the spectrum. I wreck drums and murk since I heard.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about food photography. I am here at one of my favorite clients and one of my longest service clients, Lightroom Editing. They are reopening this week sometime to do a takeaway menu. In Australia at the moment, we allowed, cafes and restaurants are allowed to operate if it's only takeaway. So they've redone their menu, redone everything, and I'm taking a few food photos today. In the past, a couple of people have asked me how to take better food photos and what you need to be doing, so we're gonna go through that really quick. A few little tips that I like to keep in mind. Usually when I'm shooting cafes, I like to shoot natural light just for me, because if I'm producing something for a client, I want their customers to see the food and see the environment as what they remember it being, or first time they're seeing it and they really like the food photos online on the socials. When they come into the location, they're actually going to be able to experience that and get what they see online. So very important for me to shoot natural lighting. For me, if you are shooting natural lighting, golden rule is always shoot near a window because of nice, beautiful lighting. For me, as you can see right here, they've got these beautiful wall-to-ceiling windows here. I'm going to be shooting this little brioche for you, take you through a few little tips and tricks about how to shoot that properly. When I'm shooting, one of the things I do to really define a piece is I find the most, I guess, interesting segment of the burger. So we've got a little brioche here, and you can see we've got all this texture on this side, and obviously there's a flat side. I've purposely positioned that so it's opened up, you can see the layers of the burger itself. What I want to do when I'm shooting this photo is make sure that this side is facing at a 45-degree angle to the window. What that's going to do is that light's going to come over it nice and beautifully and create this texture and give it real depth and a real feel to it. For my style of shooting, if I turn it at 45 degrees, what you're going to get is a nice sort of texture and a nice sort of depth to the photo that you won't find if you're shooting straight on. So I'll show you the two different examples of that here. Another little thing to keep in mind, guys, is actually the surroundings of your image. For me, when I'm shooting, I like to mix up the colors as much as possible. You really want the food to pop. So luckily with what we're shooting with today, you've got a sort of nice blue plate with the yellow or the orange, the gold of the bun and the egg and bacon. Really, really nice. The photos I just showed you there were actually kind of bad just because of the background. If you look at that background, it's quite boring and quite plain because golden color from the bun is blending in way too much for the table. So it's a little bit samey. Maybe that's the style you want to go for. It might look all right with a flat lay, but for me, I really want it to pop and stand out. So I'd really much prefer to use a darker sort of style of background, like so. Another thing is, guys, this isn't actually set up ideally for what we're shooting, but what I like to do when I am shooting is shoot as a 45-degree angle down. Very rarely will you find me shooting directly level with the subject, just because I find it doesn't really show it off too much. If you shoot a little bit higher, you're going to get a nice bit of depth to it, and you are going to bring in that background a lot more. Unless you've got a very layered sort of piece like these photos here. That was a previous item that they had on the menu before they went to pure takeaway. It is very large, very tall, and it does make sense to shoot at the level of the subject. When I'm shooting food photography, generally I shoot either down or 45 degrees, and remembering we want the subject itself to be sort of parallel to the window, shooting at a 45-degree angle, just like so. So something I forgot to mention before was your camera settings when you're shooting these. Obviously, like any other type of photography, you want to keep your ISO as low as you can because you don't want that grain. Sometimes it can work. This is a real retro cafe, so I don't mind bumping my ISO up a fair bit. But for me, I really want the shots to be nice and clean, nice and bright, nice and vibrant as much as we can, while incorporating a bit of moodiness. Food photography isn't that much different from other types of photography, so it really depends what you want to go for. If you're doing a shot like this one, you want to keep your shutter pretty high because obviously I didn't want any motion blur in that drip. I wanted it to be nice and clean. When talking about f-stops, I think if you're going anywhere below f2.8, you're probably going to get it a little bit too fine just because you do want the whole dish to be in focus. When I've shot anywhere under f2.8 when I'm taking food photography, I find the depth of field is just that little bit too shallow. So unless you're really trying to isolate something like a little drip of coffee like in this photo, or some sort of action that's maybe in a bit of a chaotic scene, you're really near the subject to pop, I'd be looking at your f1.4. But if you're just taking static food photos for menus, for magazines, all that, try and go for f2.8, maybe an f4 if you can, because you're just going to get a crisper image, a cleaner image, and you're going to be able to see the full dish. It's not very engaging with food photography, if you've got a really shallow depth of field and the customer client, whoever's viewing the photo, can't actually see all the elements of the dish, and that is one of the most important things. So quick recap, do 45-degree angle, nice and close to a window, just like we are here now. F's 2.8 or higher if you can, and make sure that the dish itself, including the plate, is popping out from your background. If it blends in too much, like the examples I showed you before, you kind of lose the immersiveness or making that vision really pop. Obviously on Instagram, it's really, really important to make sure things are standing out, things are really like popping in the feed, and you want to make sure that dish is the thing that people see first, not the backgrounds. So that's pretty much it, guys, for actually shooting on the set. We're going to swap over, go back to the computer, edit these up. I'm going to show you how I edit food photos, make them nice and engaging, make them pop, and tie it all together to make some sick photos. So hopefully you guys can employ this and give it a go. Before we jump into this edit, guys, I want to expand on something I said before to do with texture and colors in food photography. I think it's really important when you are delivering food photos to a client to keep the colors representative of what you get in store. I know other mediums of photography, you can play with the colors and you can move things around and it doesn't really raise any eyebrows. Unfortunately, food is so intimate and so personal to a lot of people that they're gonna notice if you got like a blue pumpkin floating around. And I've actually probably never seen a image of a pumpkin that's been changed to, instead of being like orange, it's gone to green and look well. So I think the reason behind that is you want your photography to try and reflect the experience that a consumer would get in that restaurant, cafe, bar, whatever it is. Really important to not play around with the colors too much. Obviously you can play with the saturation, play with the vibrance, but you probably don't want to push it too much when you're talking about changing the hues of colors. One thing I can say that you can play around with a whole lot is your texture, your clarity, and your dehaze, and your sharpening. The reason a lot of people stay away from texture and dehazing, especially if you're a portrait photographer, is it is known to just destroy skin tones or just really bring out flaws in a horrible way. Obviously, you're not worried about flaws and pores on food photography, so you can go to town on that slider, and it's actually a really good way to bring out a really good 3D character into the images and make things really stand out from the background. Let's jump into it, guys. I've got 3 photos lined up for us, so we're going to jump in to Lightroom and see what we got. All right, so here are our 3 photos, guys. We got one of the egg drip, one of the buffalo burger, and one of a pie. So I'll talk you through the whole process while I edit these. This is a live edit. I haven't edited these at all, so these will be the images that I actually deliver to the client, and hopefully they like them. Now, first things first, like I said, I wanted to make sure that the feel of the photo matches what the customer's going to get in store. So I know from being in this cafe quite a bit that they have quite a warm thing. They use those tungsten lights, then I think it's tungsten, where it brings a nice warm color, and they've got lots of oranges and reds in the store. So it is a very warm store. So I'm going to play with this temperature slider first and get that right. Overall color of this photo, pretty good. It is a little bit contrasty, especially through here, a little bit dark through the hand, but we'll deal with that in a minute. I do like a contrasty shot, so I will bump that up a little bit. Probably only about 20, don't want to push it too much. Already done the color. Now your effects, this is pretty much where I like to play the most. I don't really play with saturation too much. That's actually pretty good. Maybe bump it up. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I don't want it to be too orange. You want it to be like nice and poppy, but not too much. You can see how much of a difference just 13 saturation makes on the image. It's just like really, really nice. So the saturation and all that, I'm going to leave it at that. I see a lot of people that'll push it all the way up here and it looks really, really bad. Do not do that. Subtlety is key for me when you're taking really good food photography. So that's all I'm going to do. 7 vibrance, 16 saturation. Now here's where I like to play around the most, the effects panel. I don't usually go the near split toning, but texture and clarity for the 2 ones that are really going to make your images pop. So as you can see here, it's a nice image. It's taken on a good camera, obviously, but it's nothing is really standing out to me. You start bumping up that slider in the texture, and you're going to see like these sesame seeds really starting to pop. You know, the egg drip, that's really starting to be like come out of the image a little bit more. You chuck a little bit of clarity in there as well, and you're really getting a nice contrasty, beautiful sort of image, and it's really, really, really looking nice. Last thing I like to do to really make this pop and make this single subject photo stand out is just drop that vignette. I usually go for about somewhere between 20 and 30 because I like a really moody style, and I like that sort of look. So that for me is almost complete. If you look at the original, it goes from quite dull, quite bland, it's not really popping out, and then you pop it back in and you're getting a nice sort of moody image, nice and warm at the same time. And the last thing we'll do is that radial filter. I'm just going to lift the shadows up in this a little bit. Don't want to do it too much, but that is looking basically spot on. And that's done, guys. That's all it is. Pretty much like a 5-minute edit to get one food photo. It's nothing too much. I very rarely take food photos into Photoshop unless I'm doing composites. If you'd like a tutorial how to do that, click the link up here and it'll take you to that. But if we're not doing that, if it's a straight up food photos, pretty much this is my workflow. It's pretty straightforward. The reason being is I deliver a lot of photos to clients when I'm on a shoot. So if they want me to shoot for an hour, I'll give them all the photos I can take in an hour. So I like to smash through it really quick. So this one's pretty good. I think I overexposed it a little bit, so I'm gonna bring that down just because I feel like the pie, the subject, is a little bit too exposed. And then we're gonna bring that up a little bit. And then I think that's pretty good. Again, bring that warm thing because the client's thing is really warm, and I really like warm food photos. There's just a little bit more to them, and I think it really draws you in. And now we can play around with our texture, our clarity, add that vignette in, and you can see how much character that's just injected to the image already. I think for me, when I think about pies, I think about winter, I think about wanting it to be nice and cozy and feel that warmth. So I really brought some warmth into the image, made sure that pie is really popping. If we zoom in here, you can see it's really looking nice and sharp. Really good image here. And last thing that I actually didn't cover in the last photo, whoops, rookie mistake, is sharpening. With this, I don't know if you guys know this, in Lightroom, if you click on the masking button and press Alt, you can slide this down and see where you're actually sharpening. The white areas will be sharpened in all this. So we're gonna slide this pretty far up till we're just getting the details and shot for the pie. Sharpening is an interesting thing where it adds contrast to the outlines of images. So when you're doing this, you don't want to push it too far. If you push it really far, it's going to stand out a little bit too much and you're going to start degrading around the edge of the image. You might not always notice it, but you can see how when we do it too much, you're going to get a little bit of artifacts around the edges here. So I'm going to bring it back down. I usually find somewhere between 70 and 100 on your sharpening is round about the sweet spot, and so what's going to bring out the image in a nice natural way and just make your images look more crisp without making it look too doctored. So that one, last little thing I think it needs is probably a bit of a crop just to make sure that pie is just center, and that is looking pretty good. So we've got our original there, and then we're going to chuck that in there. See, that looks really nice. It's not the most exciting food photo I've ever taken, but you can see it pops. It's got a lot of character, nice and warm, which is pretty much going to sell the product a little bit more because you think about pies, think about winters coming up here in Australia. People are going to be looking to buy that sort of stuff. Last image. Now this one was really, really interesting, just because this one was really interesting just because when I took the photo, I didn't mind the concept of it, of being held out towards the camera, but I really didn't like the colors in it. This one is quite a bland image. There's no vibrance, there's no brightness. If you look back at the bun photo, you got the orange here against the white and it really pops out, whereas you got white here against white. You got a little bit of color through the greens here, and the buffalo sauce is adding in a little bit of color, but you're not getting a huge amount through any of the other image. So it's really hard to make this one really pop, but we're gonna give it a go. One thing it definitely needs is a lot more contrast. I'd probably take out the highlights a little bit just because I want to dull this a little bit, this background. And again, adding that color back in, that orange, but this is for the client. So that is a taste thing, that is up to you. And we're gonna go play with our texture, bumping that up bumping our texture by about 30, clarity by about 15, chuck in that vignette. And what I want to do is come down to our sharpening and make sure we're masking it out so it's pretty much just on the burger. That's gonna pop up. Now to make this pop even more, we're going back to that radial filter. I'm gonna chuck that over there. I'm gonna bring these highlights back into it and also lift the shadows out a little bit. So because I dropped the shadows, the highlights in the image prior to going into the radial blur, brought them back in that radial blur, a radial filter, and lifted the shadows a little bit so we're not losing so much of the detail here. Could probably even go a little bit more on the filter, I think, with the shadows. It's always tricky because you don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to lose too much of it. And I might just extend that out a little bit. There we go, and I think the last little touch that needs is a little bit more. Actually, I'll probably just do it on the filter here. A little bit more saturation, a little bit more contrast. See what we've got. So here's our original, very cold, very blue, there's nothing really going on, and that's the edited image. So that is pretty much it, guys. So here are the three images. Show you before and after. A lot warmer, a lot more character. Food photography, it's all about subtleties. It's all about bringing out the image in a realistic way. You never want to push it too much with your colors, just because it sort of breaks the immersion for the client. And I did mention that before, but just keep it in mind. It's very tempting to go ahead and really push the boundaries and make it very creative, but you want to make sure that your art is reflecting the experience the customer's going to get when they're physically at the store. Food photography is an awesome job to be in. I'll tell you why, because usually you get to eat the food, and that's probably my favorite bit about the job, but it's also just a lot of fun. It's very casual, there's no pressure, and you do get a lot of creative freedom with it. So I've had a lot of fun doing composites and all that sort of thing for clients. So I love the medium. I love shooting food photos, probably just because I get to eat it afterwards. But I hope this guy's helped you. If it did, let us know with a like. Shoot me a comment with what your favorite food is. Have you done any food photography? I'd love to know. Let me know. And I will see you guys soon. If you did get this far, I would love it if you could subscribe, hit that bell notification. I got new videos coming out weekly-ish. Don't hold me to that. At least while COVID's going on, they're weekly. And next week, I'll have a tutorial coming out about how I shoot and edit fitness videos. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.